Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and the summer of cults is continuing on. We still got a whole full month left to go. We're wrapping up July, and then we still got 4 more cults. I think it's 4. Could be more than that. After it's 4 or 5. I don't know how many Mondays there are in August, but we're still going. We're going strong through the rest of the summer, and today we are looking at, I said this last week, probably like the least problematic, least predatory, least damaging cult in the series, and that is the Source family. So let's get into it.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
James Baker Jr. was born on July 4th, 1922 in Cincinnati, Ohio at exactly midnight, which is crazy. What a coincidence. Must be some sort of divine sign that he would be destined for some sort of greatness and some huge divine leadership role, perhaps, maybe. We'll see, as if I didn't bury the lead already. Baker's father abandoned the family early on, leaving Baker Jr. with a severe case of chronic hemorrhoids that would lead him into a passion for personal health care. And that sounds like a weird misdirect. It's not. Like, maybe it was the stress of now suddenly being the man of the house, growing up fatherless, but he did have chronic hemorrhoids growing up as a kid, and it was, hemorrhoids aren't fun. You never like wiping your bum after a poo and it's just red, because your immediate thought is, oh, I have cancer. That's all cancer, but no, it's just hemi. You just pop the hemi. That's all it is. And so it's jarring, and if you have it early on, it becomes a big obsession. And Baker, he was obsessed with his hemorrhoids, and he got into just wellness and personal health care. And he eventually grew close to Paul Bragg, an entrepreneur who had been recognized by now as starting the first health food restaurant and introducing pineapple and tomato juice to American consumers. So again, this is, 30s, 40s, and obviously people were already consuming tomatoes in various ways, but like tomato juice and even pineapple juice as health foods, not there yet. V8 wasn't a thing yet, but now because of Paul Bragg, it was starting to become more mainstream. When Baker was 17, he allegedly got married and had a daughter, and then lied about his age to go join the Marines to fight in World War II. According to Baker, and I say that specifically because records are sketchy, he was placed on the USS Chicago and shot at least 14 Japanese planes during the Battle of Rennell Island while the Chicago was sinking. He was also allegedly awarded the Medal of Honor. He wasn't, but never received it because he had been subjected to the brig for breaking the rules of engagement with the enemy or something like that. I don't know. After World War II, Baker returned to Cincinnati and briefly operated a popular gym before closing it leaving his family, just like his father, and moving to California. Once in California, Baker worked as a stuntman. He then robbed 11 banks and healed a Samoan chief's daughter with holistic dietary remedies. Did any of this actually happen? I don't know. It's what he says, though. In 1955, he then used everything that Paul Bragg had taught him and opened his first restaurant called the Aware Inn on the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. He also judo chopped his neighbor to death who had tried attacking him with a knife. This is true. But he was cleared of any wrongdoing in the name of self-defense. So, like, he did. He went full Austin Powers, judo chop, on his neighbor because his neighbor tried to attack him with a knife and got cleared because he was acting in self-defense. That is the one element of his story that is certifiably true. Everything up to that point, very questionable. As the counterculture movement grew in California in the 1960s, Baker opened a successful sandal shop and began hanging out with a group called the Nature Boys. He became a vegetarian, met his eventual second wife, Elaine, and then would go on to have 3 sons with her. He also began studying under Manly P. Hall, who was the founder of the Philosophical Research Society. In 1962, Baker opened another restaurant, the Discovery Inn, which attracted big-name celebrities like Lucille Ball and Clint Eastwood. One thing that bothers me, he has opened at least 2 restaurants at this point, and he's called them inns, like a hotel, I-N-N. That's a hotel. That's not a restaurant, right? Now, granted, one of my favorite restaurants in my area, at least, growing up, there's not really any around here, but it was called the Pizza Inn. Great buffet, great chocolate chip pizza. Oh, God, so good. I don't love the name because, again, I hear the word inn, I-N-N, and I think hotel, but whatever. Just me. He opens this restaurant. Lucille Ball, Clint Eastwood are eating there. And then he quickly gets bored with Elaine and his 3 kids, starts taking LSD, and begins having an affair with actress Jean Ingram. When the affair became public knowledge the following year, Baker actually killed Ingram's husband with 2 judo chops to the neck and also a gunshot to the head. Again, though, Baker was cleared of any wrongdoing in the name of self-defense. So we are now at a point where he is a successful restaurateur, but also a 2-time murderer with judo chops and guns. But judo chops, among things. So, okay, I said it's crazy that I said this was the least problematic cult, because it still is, and you'll see why. But not a great start by any means. After opening another successful restaurant and doing a ton more drugs, Baker opened the Source restaurant on the Sunset Strip on April 1st, 1969. This restaurant was adorned with Masonic symbols that led many people to believe that Baker was involved with the Illuminati. He wasn't. He was just super into yoga and spirituality. Now, side note, shortly after this, on the early morning hours of August 9th, 1969, Baker was driving around town when he spotted Robin Popper, a 19-year-old girl that he had been trying to bang for the last few weeks, even though he was married, but, whatever, he didn't care. He found Robin hitchhiking to her friend Sharon Tate's house. Baker convinced her to go with him to a yoga class instead, and that night, Sharon Tate was murdered by the Manson family. So, crazy coincidence, right? But, Robin Popper could very well have been one of the victims of the Manson family murders, but instead, she got picked up by this future cult leader who was trying to bang her. So, listen, the Final Destination movies are built on this idea that when the universe wants you to die, you're gonna die. And maybe. But for this girl, assume all that is real, right? Fate is real. And let's say that on one hand you have a life path, and one path you get murdered by a serial killer, or 2, you get picked up by a cult leader. What has your life been up to get you to that point? It's crazy to me. Anyway, the next day, though, Robin Popper, she finds this out, right? She realizes all of this. And she's like, oh, man, I could have been murdered by this serial killer. But instead, I got picked up by this guy. And she took this as a sign that Baker was a divine being who had saved her from Charles Manson, which is kind of a stretch. And then she ended up marrying him the following year, which I don't know how unless, he finalized the divorce from Elaine, but whatever. Thanks to Baker's healthy lifestyle that Robin adopted, she also ended up being cured of a variety of physical ailments that she had allegedly long suffered with. At that point, she became an evangelist for Baker and fully devoted herself to his teachings and his way of life. In 1971, Baker took a 90-day trip with 83 of his yoga students and Yogi Bhajan, his spiritual leader at the time, that really just ended up being like nothing more than a marketing scheme, but whatever. They went on this retreat, and during this retreat, Baker realized that only he could be the spiritual leader that he needed in his life. So he changed his name to Father Yod and wrote a book. And again, if you want people to take you seriously, you have to write a book. It's about authority. Listen, it's not true. All right. I've written 30 books. No one cares about me whatsoever. That's beside the point. He also developed his own version of the 10 Commandments, which borrowed from Egyptian, Native American, and Atlantean philosophies. And you're probably thinking like, John, what kind of philosophies are that? Well, here you go. All right. These were Father Yod's 10 Commandments. Number 1, obey the teachings of your earthly spiritual father, Father Yod. Number 2, love your earthly spiritual father more than yourself. Number 3, don't harm your body. I think that's fine. That's a pretty universal one. Number 4, allow each vibration to complete its own cycle without interference. Okay, dork. Number 5, possess nothing you do not need and share all that you have. In other words, give up all your possessions and give me all of your money. Number 6, man and woman are one. Let nothing separate them. Yeah, you hear that? Gays? I don't know. It had nothing to do with it. Number 7, don't fall prey to lust, but come together when the 3 vibrations of the physical, mental, and emotional are in harmony with spiritual love. Whatever that means. Number 8, every morning, join your vibrations with the ascending currents of universal life energy that your earthly spiritual father has taught you. Number 9, do everything energetically, intelligently, truthfully, and lovingly. I think that's a good one. That's a good one that everybody can live by. I'm behind that one. And then number 10, when these commandments have been mastered, leave the house of your earthly spiritual father and do the work of your heavenly father. And here's the problem with that. You're never going to master the work and the commandments of the earthly spiritual father. You're always going to be under his influence. And that's how he got you. That's how he got him in. And so Baker, with these commandments, began hosting weekly meditation classes, which soon devolved into free love and tantrism. Tantrism, i.e. tantric sex, where you're just doing it for hours at a time. The group also practiced Kabbalah and extreme vegetarianism. Like extreme as in like if you wait too long after cutting open a fruit, you shouldn't eat it because its life forces have dissipated too much. Like weird, dumb, made up junk like that. Anyway, I didn't even know that was it. I just thought vegetarianism, you just don't eat animals. No. You can only eat fresh fruits and vegetables. None of that frozen garbage in the grocery section, all right? Its life forces have been depleted, all right? Probably all the produce in grocery stores. It's just been sitting in freezers and warehouses forever. It doesn't have life forces anymore. It's not good for you. You got to go out to actual gardens and pick the stuff fresh. Anyway, it's so stupid. The following year, in 1972, Baker convinced his employees/followers, employees of the Source restaurant, by the way, like that is still a big thing. But he convinced them all to pool all of their money together so that they can go live in a house. They moved into a mansion in Los Feliz, just down the street from the Source restaurant. He then instructed everyone to hand over their personal belongings and cut ties with any friends or family that refused to join them. Cult. Because most members of the cult were less than 18 years old at the time, several angry parents called police to the house on numerous occasions and tried to get Baker charged with statutory rape. For some reason, that never actually ended up happening. In response to this, Baker then began pairing people together and ordered them to get married if they wanted to continue living at the mansion. And here's the thing. Everyone was super on board with this. And within a few weeks, the cult's membership numbers just exploded. Soon, hordes of people were wearing white robes and turbans all over the mansion. They were participating in Baker's spiritual boot camp, which began at 3 a.m. every day with a round of marijuana, or quote unquote, the sacred herb, according to Baker. This weed was then followed by cold showers, yoga, chanting, and a round of aerobics. Later in 1972, Baker decided that his heavenly father wanted him to have multiple wives because, of course, he's a cult leader. Why wouldn't he? But after taking more than a dozen teenage girls as his wife, the super open-minded members of the Source family, which is what they were calling themselves now, got offended by this and began leaving the group. Even Robin, who was the first one to come on board with all of this, really started to begin to realize that Baker wasn't a spiritual leader, but rather just another creepy old pervert, and challenged him on it. In response, she was demoted from her position as house mother to just one of his common wives. Although the restaurant continued to do well, making upwards of $300,000 each month, which is almost $2 million in today's money, the cult's neighbors, wary of the Manson family's recent actions, wanted them gone, right? Because, again, like I said, like the Manson family murders had happened just a couple of years before. Now you have the Source family. And, like, granted, even though they're not murdering anybody or, like, doing any, like, crazy Semitic or racist things, like, people are still really wary of this cult because, it's still in the same vein as Charles Manson. The group eventually had to move into a 3-bed, 3-bath house, which would have been great if the cult wasn't consisting of 150 people at this point. Although everyone was extremely cramped and, were constantly being harassed by police and angry parents who wanted their teenage children back, the group did find time to start a band, Yahowah 13. And boy, listen, last week we listened to Dwight York's music, was pretty solid. Yahowah 13, proof that, a lot of money and desire and ambition does not make you necessarily very talented. Baker turned the Holmes garage into a full recording studio, and yet it still sounded that terrible. That is Baker as the singer. And, oh boy, over the next 4 years, this band produced 65 albums. A lot of their music can be found on YouTube. And because no label would remotely consider signing them, can't imagine why, The band signed up to play at local high schools and then used those shows to recruit new members to the cult, which is insane that anyone would join them after hearing that. All right, but whatever. In 1974, Baker finally announced that he was God in the flesh, so he is now just full-blown cult leader, as if he wasn't already. He also became convinced that the country was on the verge of a series of apocalyptic events. He predicted a nuclear war, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions that would all happen in succession. Obviously, none of them did. However, when a baby born in the cult developed a staph infection, this is where things really began to unravel. Despite the baby's father's wishes to go out to a hospital and get antibiotics, the people in the cult refused to let him go. He did, however, eventually escape and took the baby to the UCLA Medical Center, where doctors informed police of possible child endangerment at the Source family compound. Because remember, these are all like holistic natural healing people. Like they probably wanted to just rub some aloe branches on the infection and that they thought that would cure it. And that's not how you cure staph infections, all right? You have to have serious antibiotics to do that because staph infections don't play around. So now, between the police questioning Baker about child neglect, angry neighbors who didn't take kindly to all of the underage kids hanging around, and probably all of the terrible music coming out of the garage, and now the IRS politely asking the Source to pay the taxes that the business owed, Baker decided to move the cult to Kauai, Hawaii, and like basically start over there. However, the native Hawaiians did not want a cult living on their island and actually began shooting at the house that the cult occupied. Baker then quickly grew paranoid that the government was now after him and had the new compound fortified with weapons and guard towers to prevent anybody from getting to him. Over the next year, Baker then began traveling abroad in hopes of finding a new permanent home for the cult. Those that stayed behind worked with Hawaiian authorities to then get transportation back to the mainland and leave the cult for good. Because at this point, like, Baker's done so much drugs that he is just this completely unhinged psychopath. And so, like, all of the potential is there for this to end very, very badly. Although Baker's core followers briefly lived in San Francisco, everyone had basically returned to Hawaii by July of 1975. At least the people who still like really believed in this guy. At that point, though, Baker was over it. He came out and he admitted that he wasn't actually God, which actually came as a complete surprise to many of his followers who had become convinced that he was God, which is ridiculous. His wiener had stopped working, which means he couldn't have sex with all of his teenage wives. And in all, he was just tired. He was old at this point. You know, he was almost, he was over 50 years old. He was just tired of being a cult leader. You know, all of the drugs, all of the sex with teenage girls who were also his wives, and just all like leading all of these people who were legitimately stupid people. All right. I can't express that enough. And he knows this because like you go recruit kids at a high school band show who, after hearing your terrible music, still think that you're God and still think that your natural healing and extreme vegetarianism is a cool way of living. That would get so tiring. I'm amazed he lasted this long. But whatever. On August 25th, 1975, a somber Baker approached a cult member named Mercury, because of course, and asked if they wanted to go hang gliding. Mercury had never been hang gliding before. Baker had never been hang gliding before either. And several of Baker's wives immediately knew what was going on here. But a short time later, Baker and a group of his followers reached the edge of a cliff near their home in Hawaii. Baker then waited for a strong gust of wind and then asked Mercury to push him off the 1,500-foot cliff. And away he goes. All right. And as he soars over the Hawaiian rainforest, the strong winds that had helped launch him off of the cliff immediately stopped. And Baker plummeted straight down to the ground below. Although he briefly corrected his glider and flew over the open blue Pacific Ocean for a moment, he eventually crashed onto the beach, splattering himself all over the rocks. Baker's followers sprinted down the mountain and arrived to find him paralyzed and in a ton of pain. At least the part of him that wasn't paralyzed was in excruciating pain because he basically just hit these piles of rocks at full speed, just terminal velocity into the... Anyway, however, Baker was very calm and actually seemed relieved about everything that had just happened. Although his followers carried him back home and spent the next 9 hours chanting and praying for him to heal because they thought, well, duh, that's the best way to do it. Baker then did die from his injuries. Over the next 3 days, his followers kept his body out and chanted Yod He Vau He as a way to help him find the river of life because they're all so incredibly stupid. Obviously, I don't know if he did or not, but his body eventually decomposed, and then everybody just kind of went about their lives. The Source family cult fully dissolved 2 years later, and although they held reunions several times over the next few decades, it was just really people there meeting up to just kind of reminisce on how stupid they are or were. I don't know. It's all dumb. All right. The Source family in the books. See what I mean? Like how it was the least problematic? Yes. Were there a lot of underage girls that were sexually abused? Yes. All right. But only the cult leader ended up dying. There wasn't a ton of mass murder. Everyone went back to their lives. All right. It was all fine. Compared to a lot of the other stories that I've told so far in the Summer of Cults and the ones that we have yet to cover, hardly the worst to ever come out of it. So let us recap and see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number 1, James Baker Jr., a.k.a. Father Yod, just kind of slowly turned into this holistic cult leader. There's nothing really there that... No crazy life events. His father abandoned him and he had some really bad hemorrhoids, but I don't think hemorrhoids would turn you into a cult leader. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Number 2, ended up abandoning his family, of course, but then opened up a couple of very successful restaurants in Los Angeles. There was the Aware Inn. There was the Lantern Inn, I think is what it was, or Discovery Inn. Sorry, the Lantern Inn was a restaurant in my old hometown. Jesus, I haven't thought about that place in forever. The Aware Inn, the Discovery Inn, and then obviously the Source restaurant on the Sunset Strip where his cult really grew. And then number 3, aside from taking teenage girls as wives, he also saved Robin Popper from being murdered by the Manson family. He probably didn't know. He may claim he did, but he wouldn't have known. But yeah, first follower, really, Robin Popper, saved from being murdered by the Manson family.
What did we learn?
Next week, as the Summer of Cults continue, we are looking at the Aggressive Christianity Mission Training Corps, and you should absolutely take every single one of those words literally to kind of tell you what that's going to be about next week. So that's going to do it. Also, hang on. First of all, you didn't think for a second that I was going to play half of that Yahweh 13 song and just not mention it again? Because of course not. We're going to play them out. You have to listen to the rest of the song. It's so terrible that I had to listen to it. You had to do it too. But that's it. Thank you so much for continuing to listen to this show. Hopefully this song doesn't scare you off. Come back next week and listen to the rest of the cults. Tell all your friends about the show and keep it weird.
I've wandered near and I've wandered far, chased after many a star. Now I know just what you are. You're the same as me. Let's get it on.